By the end of high school, I was selling, but I never actually got busted for selling. It wasn't until after I had quit selling for a while before I got arrested. I had a pretty normal childhood growing up. I played a lot of sports, spent a lot of time with family and friends, and kind of did okay in school. I was bored. I was smarter than the grades I pulled off. I was just bored and didn't really apply myself.
Right.
I was always kind of middle of the road, you know? Later on in life is when I started to kind of get a little crazier. I started to kind of rebel a little bit. Late middle school, I would say, was like the first time that I kind of
pushed the envelope.
Exactly. Yep. Sneaking out, smoking pot a little bit, things like that, you know. Helped that I had an older brother who was like a senior in high school at the time. So I was exposed to things that probably most people my age weren't.
Right.
So that kind of facilitated it a little bit, I think. But I started with smoking pot every once in a while, you know, kind of not even a weekend thing, like once a month maybe. Later on in high school, it progressed to a daily thing, and then it progressed to eventually me selling it and making quite a bit of money in high school from it. I played sports all the way up until middle of high school. I was a basketball player by the end. I played football and basketball and lacrosse when I was growing up, but I only played basketball into high school, and then quit after my sophomore year. And when I quit basketball is really when stuff started going downhill. So that was probably the single decision I would say that had the biggest effect on how my life would, like the trajectory of my life. You know what I mean? Like the biggest fork where I could have avoided a lot of the things I ended up having to go through had I stuck with sports, I think.
Right.
Personally.
What did your parents say?
They, you know, my parents, God bless them, they were really not strict. So they were willing to let me kind of do what I wanted to do as long as they didn't see it as destructive. And they didn't know about like the pot and all that kind of stuff until way later. I was pretty good at hiding it. So to them, they thought I was just kind of quitting playing basketball. I never got into any legal trouble until I was way later. Actually, that's not true. I did get a minor in possession of cannabis at one point, but in Colorado, it was like a $50 fine or something like that. It was nothing. So that was like the only trouble I got into until my mid-20s. So I was pretty good at hiding it. So they didn't really know what was happening until it was too late, probably.
So, I mean, did you still graduate high school or?
I actually graduated high school early. I didn't have the greatest GPA, but I was good enough to go to school. I started off as like a biochem major in college. Eventually I realized I was not good enough at math to finish that degree, so I changed my degree to psychology. And there's a whole lot of things that tie into that. Like I worked as a pharmacy technician for a while right out of high school, trained myself actually. I ordered some stuff over the internet and taught myself and then got certified as a pharm tech in pursuit of the goal to be a pharmacist, which is what the biochem degree was for.
Whew.
Right? I know.
But
with my drug addiction, exactly. That was what led to me leaving being a pharmacy tech, actually. Because I knew I was never going to be able to stop doing drugs, being around them constantly. And the math part was going to make my degree hard, so I just kind of folded on that idea and switched to psychology. And then followed that for quite a while, and that was kind of woven into my story with my addiction and being educated on it from like a book perspective through psychology and addiction and like psychopharmacology classes. And then on the other side, like my treatment centers that I'd been to and my own personal experiences with, you know, my friends who were addicts, myself who was an addict, things like that. So that was what consumed my life. That topic consumed my life for pretty much up until recently, till I switched to radiography.
Okay, so what happened? Were you like out of high school? During college, were you selling drugs? Were you?
Yep. So I started selling cannabis when I was like right after I quit playing basketball. So I think I was a sophomore, or it was like the year between sophomore and junior year in high school. And I started selling cannabis, and that led to me selling other drugs as well. By the end of high school, I was selling cannabis, coke, ecstasy, um, mushrooms every once in a while, pretty much all of the lower level party drugs that most people would be doing.
Right.
And kind of stuck with that. It was mostly cannabis was the large weight that I was selling. Everything else was kind of lower end, just more personal use level stuff.
Right.
But that continued on into college. But I never actually got busted for selling. My charges somehow for the long time that I had been doing that never got busted, never got in trouble for distribution or selling or even any type of personal use amounts. It wasn't until after I had quit selling for a while before I got arrested the first time, which is kind of ironic. But
How did that happen?
so the night that I got arrested,
Was that in, you were still in college?
Yes. So I was 26 at the time. And I had been struggling with, I was an IV user by that point. I started using, I know the story is wild. I started using IV when I was 18 or 19. I had moved to Texas for college, came back, and right after I came back and got back into my old circles, it was right at the time when they stopped making the Oxycontin pills the way they used to, and so it shot up and became really popular. And so I graduated to that and had been an IV user for a while. And the day I got arrested, it was my first time relapsing after getting clean. I had gone to Florida and spent a month in Florida getting clean. I was coming off of Suboxone, and because I had tried to stop, I had gotten on Suboxone, but then continued to use. So then I was on Suboxone and dope at the same time, which was a nightmare. But anyway, so when I get back from that trip, I had been sober for the month that I was in Florida. I get back, I was okay for a couple of weeks. And the first night that I relapsed, I had gone to get dope, and I had pulled around the corner from my house. I didn't do it at home, but I was in my car, like around the corner, because at the time I was living with my parents, and shot up in the car. And it was like February in Colorado, so it was really cold. So I left the keys in the ignition so that the heater was running while I was doing it, and fell out. It wasn't an OD, but like I fell out to where I was not responsive really, but I wasn't dying. I was just kind of asleep. And somebody walked by and saw me slumped, called the police. They had to break my window, my driver's side window out to pull me out of the window because I was not responding and the doors were locked. And my dope was sitting on the seat next to me. So there was, no question. And that was what culminated in my first arrest. I actually got really lucky during that arrest because, as horrible of an idea as this was, I was a concealed carry holder for all that time before because I had no criminal record. And the night I got arrested, I didn't have my gun on me. I had taken it off and set it down right before I left to go get my dope, which was not common of me. Like I usually wouldn't even go to the gas station without my gun. And that night I did, and thank God I did, because it would have been a special offenders charge had I got caught that night.
What was the charge they charged you with?
So they gave me a DUID, and they gave me possession of Schedule 1 felony level at the time. Now it's not a felony. That same charge, that same amount today is only a misdemeanor. But back in 2016, that was a felony level charge.
Okay.
So that led to me being on papers for the last 8 years. Actually, I haven't been on papers since that arrest because of lots of things, but that was the first arrest.
Cool.
So that was the first arrest. And after that first arrest, obviously I wasn't able to stop using just because I got arrested. So while I was on pretrial that whole time, I had been using a
I'm sorry, wait, so were they saying, like, when you got arrested, like, they bring you downtown, they process you,
totally.
they let you go, and then they give you an attorney?
I had to bail. so I had to bail out. And then my parents helped me with an attorney. But yes,
What's
so I
his
had.
name?
What was his name?
No, I said,
Say
what's
that.
he saying? Is he saying, oh, you'll get probation? Or is he saying, bro, you're fucking going to do a year?
No, I wasn't looking at any time. I didn't think at the at the point, because it was my first offense ever.
But he's saying probation.
Basically, yeah, probation, but it's a felony charge also. You know what I mean? So it's like not there at the time. They were still pretty serious about it. So it was not insignificant, but it wasn't like, oh my God, I'm losing years of my life already. You know,
Right.
That ended up happening more or less, but at the time I didn't think that was the case. So while I was on pretrial, kind of going through all my court stuff, I didn't stop using, but I was on UAs for pretrial. So I was using a Wizinator to try to pass my UAs. And eventually I just couldn't put the effort in and failed. You know, one of the tests was too hot or too cold or something, and that all came crashing down. So
did they catch you with it?
They caught me. They didn't catch me with the Wizinator, but they caught me with an adulterated test, basically, and basically said, we're either going to hit you for evidence tampering or we're going to let you pee again and you can provide a hot UA, which is what I ended up doing. So, yeah.
Okay. Oh, listen, I talked to a guy who literally said, he's like, I looked down and this guy's got a fake fucking dick.
Yeah.
He goes, I mean, it's like, yeah, listen, what are you doing? I was like, no. He's like, yeah.
Things are in a really bad way when you're going to that level to try to continue.
You have to admit at that point, I think I have a problem. I'm buying prosthetic penises to pass UAs.
And taking risks to get felonies doing it, because I'm walking into the courthouse with a fake UA device, which, you know what I mean? Like, trying to fake a UA at all for any reason is technically a felony when you're on felony probation. So I was reckless, to say the least,
right,
for sure. Luckily, I didn't face as bad of a consequence for that as I could have. Luckily, wasn't always the case for everything that happened to me, but I was lucky, obscenely lucky in so many cases during my story. It's kind of ridiculous, but so that was the first arrest. The second major arrest. Well, do you want the second arrest that led to like DUI and possession charges? Because between those, I had some, like, came and did like a home inspection and found some stuff. So I got like a bond violation, and you know what I mean? That happened a few times. And so there were some arrests in there, but they didn't really, they were just kind of, exactly. They were kind of tacked on to the back of the major arrest. It wasn't until I caught, like, the whole new case was my second DUI.
Well, what are your parents saying at this point?
They are motherfucking me up and down the wall. They are pissed off. They're helping me. They're not kicking me out. I mean, they love me, so they're not, going to make me sleep on the street. They're giving me a place to be that's safe, but they're trying to help me get treatment, but they're not going to,
not coddling. Yeah, they're not coddling you. They're
right.
Just like, you need to get your shit together.
Yep. And actually, they ended up being the ones who saved my life during all of my overdoses. My dad had to give me CPR at one point. They both had to Narcan me a couple of times. So they've been there. They've gone. I put my parents through unspeakable hell that I could never make peace with. But for the rest of my life, I will definitely make the effort to atone for it, I should say. So.
Right. So what happened ultimately? What led to the next kind of arrest?
So my next arrest, I'd been on probation for years by that point. Because of
the constant, they kept extending the probation.
Yep. So I would do some time, and then it would get extended because I would fail a test, or they would do a home inspection and they would catch me with like paraphernalia or something to that effect. So it got extended twice, I think, before they ended up revoking me, and then I got sentenced to a drug court, which was, at the time, they told me, like, this is your last stop before prison. Like, if you can't make this work, then you're going to prison. Because my original deal for the first case was like a deferred, But because I couldn't stop using, that went away. And then it was, okay, if you complete it, we'll wobble it down to a misdemeanor. And then, so progressively, as I was screwing up my chances, the deal for that case was getting worse and worse. So while I was on probation, they had moved me to drug court, and while I'm failing out of drug court because I can't get my shit together because I'm still using and not complying. I mean, I guess I'm 90% complying, but I just, like, everything else I'm doing, I'm making all of my classes, taking all my tests, they're just hot.
It's not horseshoes.
Right. Right. I
That
totally,
that don't count. Like,
it's not hand grenades. It's a good point. But that's the addict brain, that's the addict mind thinking, I'm almost there. I'm almost there, So while I'm in drug court, I am still using, but by this point I had progressed to fentanyl use because by this point, the pills were everywhere. Now, just to backtrack real quick, I'd actually done fentanyl my first time in high school. Back then it was patches and suckers. So I had been doing fentanyl since I was in high school, but then it kind of went away for a while and it wasn't street available like it is now.
right.
But then eventually when it became street available, I progressed from heroin to and that's what led to my second arrest. And so my second arrest, I was in my car in my neighborhood again, same neighborhood, different corner, fell asleep. I was on my way home from a girl I was seeing's house, and I stopped by just to smoke real quick before I got home, and fell out with the keys in the ignition, and basically a whole repeat of the first charges all over again, except this time they didn't give me felony drug charges because they said that they were doing a welfare check, and in Colorado, a welfare check makes you immune from drug charges if they find them. So, yeah, so I guess they decided that I didn't deserve the felony, or at the time now it would have been a misdemeanor, drug possession charges, so they just gave me the DUI charges. And then my third arrest was right after that.
I was gonna say, do people know what fell out was? So it means you were passed out.
Basically, yeah. Yep. It's not ODing, but it's not responsive.
Right. I was gonna say the first time I ever heard somebody say, yeah, he fell out was I was in prison.
Yep.
And somebody said it, I was like, fell out? Like, and then since then I've heard it in just like regular everyday use.
Yeah. When you see somebody who's fallen out after you hear the term, it makes perfect sense because like you see somebody who's just slumped and like it's perfect. It's a perfect description.
Well, I've heard nodded out.
Nodded out too. Yep. We used to call it the nod squad.
Boom. Yeah, I think I mentioned there was a guy that he ran I mentioned this before, not to you, but I wrote a story about this place about a pain clinic. And this guy was running the pain clinic, and one of the doctors calls him in the back and says, hey, can you check on something for me? And he goes, yeah, what's up? He said, I've had several patients come in here and they've got like brown smudges like on their face or their nose or their cheek. He's like, it's like, I've had like 4 patients today that have had this. I don't know what it is. And they don't know what it is. Like I've said, what is this? They're like, I have no idea. I'm like, can you figure it out? He goes, okay. So he walked outside and to the visitation room and looks around, and he notices that there's several guys that are sitting there with ice cream cones, chocolate ice cream cones, and they would get because they're drug addicts and they're waiting to get like
like sugar,
right? They're all waiting to get their prescriptions refilled for oxys, and they would sit there, and so because they had so many people in the waiting room. So this was called American Pain. It was American Pain. It was a huge place down here. So the ice cream trucks and the food trucks would come by constantly. And this one guy came by and all he had was chocolate ice cream, and they bought up the chocolate ice cream. And so there's 8 or 10 guys, bought it up, and they were sitting there and they're taking their ice cream and they're dozing off, and that ice cream would hit them in the head and they'd wake up. They don't realize that they've got ice cream because they're so numb. Then they go and see the doctor, and they've got these little brown spots on their foreheads, and he was I was looking, I was like, could it be the ice cream? And I stared at this one guy. He said he was literally watching the guy as he went, boom, and sat back up and had a little patch. And he's like, ice cream. So he went back to the doctor, said, people were nodding out in the fucking thing from the ice cream. It was it was a mill. It was a pill mill. So like the doctors are all kind of in on it.
They know what's going on. They're trying to avoid having those problems, not because they care about the patients, just because they don't want the heat.
Right. So anyway, I thought that's definitely nodding out.
Yeah. Yep. You're absolutely, like I said, when you see it, it definitely, it's like, aha, that's what nodding out is.
Yep. So they got you. So they on the next DUI, what'd they arrest you for? I mean, it was the same exact thing.
All three of them were the exact same: falling asleep in the car and having possession of something and the keys in the ignition. Only thing I've ever been arrested for, other than like a violation of bond. Never been arrested for literally anything else other than that exact scenario. The third one, go ahead.
Yeah. At this point, come on, bro. Like you got it.
I know. Oh, I'd been in and out of treatments by this point. I mean, I was trying to get sober. I had some sober periods, had periods where I was screwing up. So I was totally aware of the issue. I had, by that point, probably been through like 3 treatment centers. Put a lot of effort in, tried to educate myself, got on the track of becoming a peer recovery coach and kind of working with my own peer recovery coach, thinking that might be the direction I wanted to head eventually, if I could get my things figured out. But that definitely, it just kind of kept slowly escalating, but not without being recognized. You know what I mean? Like we were definitely, I was trying, in my opinion, very hard to get my stuff under control. I just was failing miserably.
Are you working at this point?
Yeah, I never worked anywhere super long, but at one point I was like a warehouse manager for electronics recycling company. I worked at Bed Bath & Beyond as a warehouse manager. So a lot of retail stuff, nothing, I was always working, doing something, but it was never like a great job or a career or anything like that. But yeah, I was always had a job, or going to school, or both. Wasn't until after my violation of my first arrest that I stopped going to college, because I just couldn't afford to anymore with what was going on. So that was kind of the end of my psychology degree back then. And then eventually, recently, I switched and kind of picked back up wanting to go to radiography school. So,
okay. So, well, on the third time that you got arrested, what happened? Well, you should have gone to jail at this point.
I did. Oh, you mean like prison?
Prison, like,
yeah, you're right, definitely. So I got arrested at a gas pump. I had pulled up to a gas station and finished getting my gas, and before I pulled away, I smoked a few fentanyl pills, and nodded out again, fell out again. The cops show up. Actually, it was a K9 unit, and he woke me up at gunpoint this time. I had nodded out, and he tapped on the glass with his pistol pointed at me, and I remember waking up and looking over my shoulder and seeing his pistol pointed at my face, like a couple inches away, and being so out of it that it just like didn't even really register. Like I just reached for the door. Like, yeah, really wild situation when I look back on it. But yeah, so I got arrested there, taken to jail again, which was right after, it was like I want to say it was like 2 months after my second DUI arrest. Right. So I got my first arrest, and then I didn't get in trouble again with new charges for like 6 years or something like that. And then I got my second and third DUIs within 2 months of each other. And so the third DUI, I was still going through the court cases for the second one. Lost my license, all that kind of stuff, had to get an interlock. And now I'm on probation still, dealing with that. And if I complete probation, then I'm good to go. And I'm free and clear. I've already completed all of my requirements for probation, paid all my fines, done all my community service, all my treatment, all my DUI classes, everything. So I'm literally just reporting and taking my UAs, and that's it.
But you didn't go to prison. You just got arrested and got bonded out and just...
Yeah. So the reason I didn't end up going to prison was because I went to treatment instead. I went and did like a 3-month like ComCore. Out here it's called ComCore Community Corrections. So it's kind of the step between like county and prison. It's like
Is it a residential?
yeah, it's a halfway house basically. It's
Okay.
like a halfway house that has a residential drug program inside it. So I did a 3-month program there, completed it with flying colors, just did amazing, didn't even get written up, nothing. So they started to kind of work with me, and they're like, okay, if you continue to do well, we will, work with you. And they kind of amended the sentencing requirements because of how well I was doing and how much effort they saw that I was putting in. And up till this point, they still have been working with me. I think I've only had a couple of slip ups since that point. So
Okay. What's a slip up?
slip up is like, I found some dope on the ground and used once, or was with somebody and used, but then like stopped, right? So like, I know to the average person that sounds crazy. I know that sounds totally wild, but
Wow.
there's a total difference between like an addict single use and an addict like just going back to being an addict. You know what I mean? Like if I'm doing really well and I slip up one time, but then I get right back, I get my shit back together, I don't keep screwing up, I get back to doing the right things. That's different in the court's eyes than somebody who is an addict who relapses and then continues to fail tests and continues to use and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, they probably could have been justified. Well, not probably, they absolutely would have been justified if they wanted to put me in prison. But I think they took pity on me.
Where are you now? Where are you staying now?
I'm with my parents now.
What are you doing? And what are you doing are you just going to school?
So on the side, I help in some grow houses, and I also help like painting and stuff like that. Nothing, well, it's legal out here. You know what I mean?
All right. I understand. It has like an alcoholic saying, I work at ABC Liquor. But
Well, okay, fair enough. I mean, I don't know if I see it that way, but fair enough.
right. From my perspective, but I have no experience in it. So I'm not saying I'm speaking from a position of authority or experience in any way. Like I have no idea, but
Well, and it's definitely not a popular opinion that I have. So I get it. And most public probably looks at it the same way you do,
Right.
which is like, it's obvious, duh, if you get involved with that, it's going to lead you back. And I think that's the case for a lot.
I was going to say, for me, I would even think this, it wouldn't just be like an alcoholic working at ABC Liquor. It'd be like a drug addict working at a bar. It's like, you really probably should remove yourself from that situation anytime, any moment of weakness. But then there's going to be people that have the same opinion of like, no, you should be able to work around all that stuff and not drink at all if it's a problem, or not be tempted at all if you have it under control. But let's face it, it doesn't always work like that.
Yeah. My perspective is, so are you familiar with MAT services? Like medication assisted treatments?
Oh, okay.
Like methadone, Suboxone, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So this is going to also sound wild again, but personally, cannabis is like a MAT treatment service for me. When I smoke cannabis, I don't do opiates. I don't do right? It's like my methadone or my Suboxone treatment, except it doesn't lead me to do the opiates. It keeps me from the opiates. When I stop smoking is when I usually relapse and go back to the opiates. So I had an issue with drug court because they wanted me on methadone, which is infinitely more dangerous and problematic and harder to come off of. And I wanted to be able to just smoke cannabis because it was serving the same purpose, right, in my eyes. And I thought it was much safer. But because of federal law, that became a sticky situation. But personally, it's a medication assisted treatment. I have a prescription. I'm not just doing it willy-nilly. But I understand it's kind of it's not a popular opinion. It's not a topic that everybody agrees on. So.
Right. Well, it's my father, was just, he was an alcoholic, and he had, took prescription medication, and, throughout my whole life, he would go on, binges, and then he would sober up for a year, and then he'd go on a 2-week bender, and then he would sober up for 6 months, and then he would go on, and he was in and out of, rehabs, for, we always said, alcohol rehabs, but the truth is it was also prescription drugs. It's just like typically because it's my mother, my family's, the go-to is, well, he's an alcoholic. So, cause that seems better than saying,
Pill.
he's taking he's on dope. You know what I'm saying? That's, nobody wants to it's offensive enough. Right. It's I was gonna say it's offensive enough that he's an alcoholic, but he's a functioning alcoholic. Well, he's not really functioning because he was he would just go on these benders and then he's sober for 2 years and seem like he was fine. And then one day he'd walk in and he'd slur his words a little bit. And you were like, that's weird, and then you'd go sit on the couch and what's that? And you look under the cushion and there's a fucking half empty bottle of fucking booze. And you're like, Mom didn't put that there. It's like, what's going on? And he could maintain it for like 4 or 5 days. And then at some point you're like, oh, this fucker's drunk. And then it would go on a 2-week that fuck you guys. And then 2 weeks, he'd be a nut job for 2 weeks. And then he'd sober up and his company would put him in a rehab. Put him in rehab for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. And then he'd get back out and he'd be fine. So it's like, I understand that he clearly didn't, this is not something that, it's almost like, I don't want to say it snuck up on him, but it's, and you know what I account it to? Because I don't have any real experience. My only experience is me saying, man, I really want to lose 10 pounds. Yeah. Okay, well, you know what you do? Just cut back on your calories, eat twice a day, do this, do that, ride the bike for 30 minutes. There's only a couple of things and you'll very quickly, within 2 weeks, you've lost the 10 pounds very easily because I can easily lose weight. And then, 3 days into my diet, it's like, I'm going to grab a couple of chips real quick. I'm hungry. I'm just going to grab a couple of potato chips. And 10 minutes later, I'm sitting there with an empty bag and potato chip crumbs all over my stomach and my chest, watching TV going, what the fuck just happened? Yeah, why have I got an empty bag of potato chips here?
I'm going to have just one and then I'm going to stop.
Oh my God. And it's just like, and so I always account that. And then listen, then it's like, well, you know what? I've already eaten a whole bag.
So why stop now? I've already crossed the line.
There's cookies in there. I know that there's cookies. Might as well have some cookies. And listen, an hour and a half later, I've eaten a pint of ice cream, cookies, potato chips, a couple of yogurts because I ran out of ice cream, and I crawl into bed and I'm like, you're pathetic. What's wrong with you?
Why did I do that?
What just happened? And I do for some reason, I think, and that's just food. Like, what's a real drug? What's a real craving?
So the way I try to liken it to my parents is like, because of how high addicts prioritize their drug, like they'll prioritize it over food, over sex, over pretty much everything. So in their brain, their lizard brain is telling you this is needed for survival. Even though it's not, your brain is telling you that it is. So it's kind of like a mental illness in a way. But I liken it to my parents, like, think about how thirsty the thirstiest you've ever been in your life, and then just not drinking, or like being able to have a glass of water when you're the thirstiest you've ever been and just not doing it. Like, that's the level of discipline an addict has to exercise, because that's how strong the urge is to use, right? Like, it's not the same as like the average person not just choosing to stop drinking after 2 drinks. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care about alcohol. I've never been a drinker. I just don't like it. I can have a beer and not touch it again for a year. But my brother is the opposite. He can't stop once he starts. He's not really an opiate addict like I am,
right?
But he can't help the alcohol. So there's clearly something. Some people just are addicts to everything. Some people are addicts to specific things. But there's clearly like a genetic mental tie to it past just like exercising self-discipline. You know what I mean? There's a really good movie that I've seen in almost every single one of the treatment centers I've been in. It's called Pleasures Unwoven. It's a really good movie that talks about like the disease model of addiction versus like the choice model, and it goes into a lot of the science that's taking place during like a trigger or a craving or what's going on in the addict's brain. So just for anybody's curious sake, if they'd like to look that up, it's called Pleasures Unwoven. I think it was back in like 96 when it was made. So
Okay. So what else? So what else? How did, and we ended up talking because you had watched a video and you left some comments and you were irritated with the guy that had, I forget what he had said specifically. And you were like, I'd like to have a conversation with this guy. He's way off and he's this. I was like, yeah, it's probably not the best. I'm going to give you this guy's phone number. That's not going to go anywhere. Like, but then we started talking and I was like, we should probably do a podcast. Like you've clearly got, some issues that have, really dominated your life.
Majorly.
Sorry. Hey, I have a quick question. What's the tattoo?
It's a dragon.
Does it go down the back of your neck too? Or down your
No, it stops right back here.
Oh, okay.
But I'd probably like to get some more done eventually. But yeah, that's dragon. I got that before, so this is something I left out of my story. But the felony charge that I got originally eventually got wobbled down to a misdemeanor like 6 years later. And so when that happened, I had already got my neck tattoo. And had I not been a felon, I probably would never have gotten tattooed on my neck. But at the time, I'm thinking, I'm a felon. There's nothing, a neck tattoo isn't going to stop me from getting anything the felony won't. You know what I mean? And then I wasn't a felon anymore. So now I just got to make it work, I guess. But
do you have other tattoos?
Oh, yeah, lots of tattoos. I'm all sleeved up here on my hand. I got a bunch on my midsection and back, on my legs. Quite a few.
What are you doing?
I love them, man. I love them. I've always been addicted to them.
I have a buddy who he's tattooed. I mean, his head, got him on his face, all over his neck, both arms, like just his whole body. It's like, he's also a tattoo artist, but still, I remember.
For me, this, I don't know if I'll ever be able to graduate to that.
Yeah, he's got, they're just down like here and here on the neck. He's got like a little, it's kind of like an anchor or something right here. Like all these, and then when I got out of prison, I saw him because when he left prison, he had tattoos, but not on his face or his head or anything. And when I saw him, I said, bro, what are you doing? He's like, I know. It's so funny. He'll say that like every once in a while, someone will walk in or he'll walk up to somebody and they'll kind of like look like for just for a second, like they're shocked or scared or something. And he's always like, what? Like, I wonder, what was that? And he's like, oh, that's right. He's like, I keep forgetting what I look like.
I get that a lot.
Right. Too. I'm shaved with tattoos all over my head and my face. And I just walked up to this guy real quick. He's the guy, they're shocked.
Yeah. It's wild how much differently people treat you once you have a neck tattoo. It's absolutely true.
Yeah. He told me too, when he got his neck tattoo that because he was saying something to the guy that because he was counterfeiting credit cards. He's doing carding. People are getting arrested. Like he's thinking this is going to catch up to me. I'm going to end up in prison at some point. And he's like 5'7", blonde hair, blue eyed, fair skinned, 135 pounds. He's like, this is not going to look good. This is not going to go well for me. He's like, I need something to toughen up my image. So he went to a buddy who was a tattoo artist and said, hey, I really think I want to get full sleeves, chest piece. He's like, I want to toughen up my image. And the guy goes, honestly, like the placement of the tattoo, he's like you get a face tattoo or you get a neck tattoo. He's like, that's saying something.
It sends a message.
Yeah. He said, what did he say? It said, he said, that's telling society, like, I ain't getting a job at the bank, bro.
Right.
And he said, let's go with the neck tattoo. And then he got a couple of neck tattoos. Now it's the whole neck's done. But
yeah, it's definitely, I think most people that get their neck tattoos that's part of that, where it's just kind of like an outward projection of telling people to leave me the fuck alone. You know what I mean? Like, stay away.
What was it? I had one of my wife's co-defendants has a neck tattoo that says trust. This is a chick. Trust no one. She's tatted all out. I'm like, what? And then I interviewed this chick that had tats all over, and she had the all-seeing eye and the pyramid on her neck. a neck tat, and
right on the like right in the front.
Yes, and she was tatted all up and everything else, and it was just like, wow, like that's grandma, what is that? That's what I always picture. How are you gonna?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for mine to get saggy and look awful too. You know what I mean?
Well, honey, back when I was a stripper.
At least it'll have a good story attached, I guess.
Yeah.
Right?
Grandma was a gangster. So, okay, so what's going on? So what was your issue with the guy? Which I don't know. I think he was a police officer.
Yeah. So I can't remember specifically what he had said either, but he had said something. He was just being really flippant about like how people. Oh no, I'm sorry. Now I do remember. So in the video, he was talking about like an arrest or a stop that he had made, and the guy in the passenger seat had asked him why cops are always screwing with people, right?
Right.
And he got all upset about it and was like, pulled the guy out of the car and was addressing it to him. And the comment I had left was something along the lines of like, I don't understand why you're upset with the guy for asking the question. That's like, we all know cops screw with people, right? Like it's a fair question. He might have been being an asshole and you might have had a good reason to stop that car, but that doesn't mean the question he was asking you was ridiculous. You know what I mean? The guy was being an asshole. I fully recognize that, but I was just pointing out the hypocrisy of him being upset about it. But also earlier in the thing, he was talking about how other cops were super upset and they were sensitive to how people treat them or how people react to them. And then like the next story, he's, in my opinion, doing like the same thing he was talking about.
Right.
But yeah, so that was the gist of it. But it irritated me because I identify with addiction quite hard. Obviously, it's been a huge effect in my life. I have something like 30, I think I'm at 33 or 34. I have to check my book, but 34 people since high school that are friends and acquaintances that have died to overdoses. So it's a huge aspect to my life. It's a problem. And I know a lot of people in society like to look at addicts like they're just screw ups and that they're kind of the bane and a drain on society. But in my opinion, a lot of those people are struggling with something else and they could be productive members of society if the right things are addressed. And instead of throwing them away, they would be able to, like for me, for example, had I not got the felony charges originally and would have been able to continue with school and stuff, I think it's very unlikely my life would have turned out the way it did. Once I got the felony and was unable to rejoin society, I didn't really have many other options than to try to survive the same way I had been living. You know what I mean? I definitely wasn't going to get a career once I got the felony. So, and since then, they've changed the felony laws and dropped them to misdemeanor for the drug possession, which I think it should absolutely be the case. But I think addicts in general, and not all of them, there's plenty of people who are addicts who love where they're at and will never try to get sober, don't want to be a part of society, and are exactly the stereotype that most people have when they think of addicts. But I think a lot of other people are not. And those people just kind of get glossed over because of the disdain for the stereotype.
Right. Yeah. Well, it was definitely something like it's, like I've never drank or smoked or done anything. So I don't know exactly, how it works. But what I do know is that, I've seen people that clearly you gotta have this great, they're intelligent, they're smart, they know exactly what the problems are. And then 2 months later, they're on drugs again. And you're like, what happened? And it's like, like this happened and that happened. And I don't know why, but for some reason I thought, you know what? I'm going to have a beer real quick. I could have a beer. Everybody's having a beer. I've been good. I haven't had anything. And for some reason at that moment, it made sense that I could have a beer. That one beer turned into 4. And the next thing I know, I'm driving around this shitty neighborhood looking for a guy that used to sell me crack. And, 2 days later, I wake up on a couch and, it's like, what the heck? And he's like, it spiraled that quick. And then next thing you know, the guy's selling his car. Next thing you know, it's like, oh my God, like what, like you're fake, like exactly. So, and then a week later he's sober and realizes what he's done. And he's going around to all these people that he's disappointed and trying to ask them for help. And it's
Yep.
like, it's upsetting because sober, it's like a great person and who knows and says all the correct things, but then suddenly they become this, it's almost like they become this other person. And so it's tough because ultimately you're right. It does end up ruining these people's lives. And it's a burden to me, it's more of a burden to throw them in prison than it is to continue. People are like, oh, well, you can't keep putting them in rehab. Really? So you think that rehab is is more expensive than throwing him in jail for 3 years? You think this guy could go to rehab
Like
5 times, right? Exactly, in that time, and not spend the amount of money you're going to spend on throwing him in prison and making him a felon and limiting his ability to get a license in a variety of different areas, and it not only, first of all, possibly just eliminate it from being a possibility at all, or at least making it so difficult most people shy away from it. I know plenty of people that have been sober, but they have a felony, and they won't try and get their real estate license, their mortgage license. They won't try and become all kinds of things because they're like, well, the problem is they want you to spend all this money, pass the schooling, pass the test, then go in front of a board and try and convince them that they deserve to have this license. It's like, do you want me to spend 6 months and $10,000 of my time and money
on a whim, on a chance,
to go in front of a board that may say, yeah, I'm sorry, we just don't give it to drug addicts, or yours was for possession, or your crime, you have 2 felonies that were 3 years apart. Yeah, we just don't do that. Well, why'd you just
have me go through the whole process then?
Right?
Yeah,
So
it's funny you say that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was going to say, instead what happens is they say, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Fuck it, I'm just going to get a manual labor job, barely be able to pay my bills, really live on the fringes of society, which really just helps contribute to the fact that, or to me ending up using again. I can't really get my shit together. I'm around a bunch of people that are also using. It's a tough situation. It's a cycle.
Well, and it usually leads to somebody like the buddy you were just talking about. I highly doubt he wanted to go through all of those problems, right? Like you said, he doesn't ever, like, even when he takes that first drink, he's not intending for it to end up the way it does. Like, no, I don't think I shouldn't say that. I don't think most addicts really want what happens to them, right? It's a problem of not being able to stop, not the fact that they don't want to. You know what I mean? I think there's a lot of people that want to and can't. And what sucks is with addiction, because it's a spiral and it picks up so fast, that 1 week moment, you can be doing well for 23 hours of the day. But if you have that 1 week moment at the wrong time, it can just snowball and spiral out of control. And so it's one of those things that every second of every day, you have to be aware of it and vigilant. And I've struggled with that type of relapse myself, where I was doing well and there's really no excuse to relapse, and I still can't help it. You know what I mean? And most people don't want to hear that, but I try and have tried very hard, and I haven't always been successful.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, we mentioned you started to interject something when I talked about getting licensed.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. So I actually, with the school I'm going to with radiography right now, I never would have been able to do that with my felony before. So once the felony got dropped, I started the process with that. But there is an ethics board that you have to check with. So before I go to the school and start school, because it's 2 years of schooling, I need to check with the ethics board to make sure that they will certify me, right? Because like you were saying, I don't want to pay for the school for 2 years and then go to the ethics board and find out I can't get certified. So they have like a pre-ethics or a pre-certification ethics review or something like that, where you can basically like apply to them and be like, hey, here's my past, here's my history. Am I able to get certified? Which is what I went through to be able to go to radiography school. But to start school, I had to get cleared by the certification board. And the certification board says, yep, you're cleared pending proof that you have completed probation. Well, I'm not completing probation until 10 more months or whatever, because they won't release me early, even though I have everything finished and I'm waiting to go to school. They still refuse to release me early because I motioned the court asking for it and they denied me. So I basically have to wait 10 more months. And now, because I can't start the school until the certification board gives me the clear, and I can't get the certification clear until I finish probation, that I'm
10 months of limbo.
Exactly.
So what are you doing for work then?
Working, like I said, I'm helping in the grow rooms, helping buddies paint.
Oh yeah.
Some of that kind of stuff. Small odds and ends jobs. I'm not really trying to go find like a normal job and then have to stop again in 10 months when I go to school, so just kind of lucky that I have parents that are willing to help me right now and kind of help me work through a rough point in my life. I think they've recognized how much effort I've put into trying to do the right thing. And so as long as I continue to do that, they're willing to help me. So I'm lucky for that. Very lucky.
Okay. Do you have anything else you want to cover that you can think of?
Anything specifically? Not that I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, there's all sorts of other things in there. Like I didn't really touch on the overdoses much or anything. So like if you would like to do this again, there's probably more I could get into. But it's up to you.
Let's do it now. I don't do
Okay.
it. Well, I mean, when you say overdoses, I thought the overdoses were in the car, but that was just you just nodded. You just kind of passed out. And
yep, those were just not out. So my actual true overdoses were like I would have died without intervention. All of them happened at my parents' house. I'm sorry, there's one that didn't. All but one of them happened at my parents' house. And literally by the grace of God, every single time they found me ODing and got to me in time before I was done. The first time it happened, I was in my parents' basement and they knew I had been struggling really hard. I was still IV heroin. Actually, this is a wild fact, but all of my overdoses came from heroin. I have never overdosed on, even though way more potent, and that's usually what kills people. Because of my route of administration, I guess, maybe the fentanyl has been safer for me, and the IV heroin was what I always OD'd on. Just kind of a weird fact. But so my first OD was at my parents' house. They came down. They would kind of come down and check on me every once in a while just because they knew I was in a bad place, and came down and found that I had hit too much in a needle. Needle was still in my arm. We had Narcan at the house, so they had to bring and hit me with Narcan. The second time, I mean, the 2 or 3 of them were kind of the same situation. The third time, my dad had to give me CPR because I had been down and out, that I was no longer breathing at all on my own. He had to give me CPR until the ambulance got there and basically manually get the Narcan into my system. And then the last one was relevant because that was the one where I think I was officially dead for a few minutes. My body temperature was a different level of cold that I've ever felt before. They had to hit me with like 3 hits of Narcan when normally 1 is plenty to wake me back up. They had to hit me like 3 different times. Again, manually, chest compressions and stuff to get it into my system. And that one was by far the worst. And the worst part about the overdoses is they didn't scare me at the time. They had no effect. I would literally OD and then go back and use like right after I got back from the hospital, which shows you how problematic an addict's thinking is. Like, that's not normal. That's not a healthy brain doing that. You know what I mean? That's not reasonable.
Right. So, I mean, when they bring you to the hospital, what happens?
So they take you into the ER and they hook you up. They check to make sure that your pulse and breathing and blood pressure and all that's in normal ranges. But another reason why they do it is because they want to have you under observation, because some drugs have longer half-lives than others. Like methadone sits in your system forever. So if you were to OD on methadone, people have like overdosed on methadone, gotten Narcan, thought they were okay, went home, and then went back into an overdose when the Narcan wears off, because the methadone lasts longer than the Narcan does.
Hmm.
So if your dose is high enough, you can literally make it through a Narcan dose and go back into an overdose. And some people have died that way. So depending on the substance you OD on, you may or may not be out of the woods after you get Narcan the first time. So I think that's a major portion of why they take you there. But they keep you under for a couple hours usually. They'll watch you, make sure if anything changes in that period, they'll extend it. But if everything seems kind of normal by that point, that's usually when they'll release you, and then they send you a huge fat bill for it. So,
I mean, they don't. It's not like isn't there like a Baker Act? Well, I think it's Florida. They Baker Act you.
They have something like that. You mean like involuntary?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have something like that here in Colorado too, like a 72-hour thing, and then you're like, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but we have something similar to that here. But that was not done to me.
Okay.
For some reason.
I think usually like your family has to go to them and say, hey, this is the problem. If he gets back out, he's on drugs, he's using drugs. If he gets back out, he was going to kill himself. Like, and they're like, oh, okay. So then they'll hold you for like 3 days until, and then they have to release you. I think there's different levels. One's Baker Act. One is I think it's Marchman acted. I think Baker acted is when you're like mental. It's like you're I don't want to say crazy, but like you're mentally, they're afraid they're gonna commit suicide or something. Yeah, and I think Marchman acted is when it's like your family says, look, this guy's a drug addict. He's going to kill himself.
And they like force you to go through treatment and stuff like that.
They just hold you for like 3 days and they let you go.
Interesting.
They can extend it for like 10 days if you say the wrong things. But let's face it, after 3 days, you're going to say the right stuff.
Yeah.
Much better. So glad that this happened. They were overreacting. It's not that bad. Like, you're going to say the right things.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point.
So, okay. So yeah, they have the same thing in Colorado.
Pretty sure. I don't know the term of it, but yeah, I remember being in treatment with some guys. And actually, now that you say that, it might even be a step further in Colorado, because I feel like I remember somebody that I was in treatment with that had been put there. They didn't have any criminal charges, but the courts were able to force them to go through there. And if they don't, then they would be held for a certain period of time in the jails or something to that effect. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I remember it was past just like a 72-hour hold, because I actually had an ex-girlfriend that went through that. But this was something past that. So,
okay. So what else? That's it? Are we good?
Yeah, I think we're good. I just figured that was probably relevant to put in there. But yeah, I think that's pretty good overview of the nonsense I've put myself through.
Your poor parents.
Yes, very much. They are saints. I could never repay what they've done for me in 1,000 lifetimes. So.
Yeah. I was gonna say, yeah, that's like my mom, like, she's coming to see me in prison. Like, Jesus, like, you're sitting there and you're just like, fuck, like, it's just like, what a, I definitely, every time she came to see me, like, I was glad she came to see me, and I wanted her to come see me for her, because she wanted to come see me. But for me, it was horrible every time. It was just like, I'm destroying this person. I'm just a horrible human being. Like, I'm a shitty son. And that's a horrible feeling,
They stuck by me through county. I guess I didn't really go into that, but I've only done like 6 months of county time, 2 separate stints of like 3 months. But they were beside me for the whole time through that too. And similar to what you just said, it was hard for me to be knowing that I'm hurting them, but also to like be in contact with the outside world that I can't be a part of. So it was hard for me. Like, I wanted to just kind of seal myself away and have no outside contact until I finished my time, so I didn't have the reminders of the outside world. But I knew for them that would have been hard. So I, engaged with them while I was in jail, and they stuck by me. And, it wasn't that long, nothing like your prison stint, but I can relate to that feeling.
Well, what do they do for a living? Like, they're like normal people, like.
So they were both, like corporate management. My mom was part owner of an elevator company, and my dad was like a product manager.
Oh, it's worse. It's even worse. It would have been better if like, oh no, they've been to jail. They've got their problems. They're both alcoholics. They're
Well, okay, so my mom's side, there's quite a bit of addiction that flows through the family, but none of them have been arrested. None of them, like none of that. None of them been to treatment. Nothing like that. So I definitely was the black sheep in that in that stint.
it's all bad. Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, I hope everything works out at this point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good talking. I appreciate it very much, man. It was good talking. It was good. I was surprised when you responded to me. So
I try and like, the problem is sometimes I get so busy, like I won't answer any question or comments for 3 or 4 days. And people don't realize like there's 50 or 100 comments, sometimes 200-300 comments. If it's a good video too, there may be 300 comments a day. So 3 days later, there's almost 1,000 comments. And so like, I never get to them. So, I start answering the comments that are coming in, and then, so I can't, that's why I'm always like, I try and answer as many as I can. And maybe I will get really good and I'll have a slow week, and I'm literally every day answering comments every day. And so some people will email, and here's the other thing. Some people I'll check my email, whatever, 4 o'clock in the morning, I'll wake up and my wife's sleeping, and I'll pull my phone out and just start looking through emails, and I'll see an email that's like that. Like I want to respond to that email. That's I need to respond to that. I feel like I want to talk to this person. I want to respond. And then I'll mark it unread. And then I'll think I'll do it later. Like I can't do it right now. I'm laying in bed, and I'll type something up later. Well, then the problem is an hour later, my wife wakes up, we go to the gym, we come back, whatever. I answer a couple of emails, or I do something, I pay some bills. She leaves, I end up getting on a podcast. It's 2 hours. Something happens. I have to talk. I have a meeting. I have another podcast. I do that podcast. Before I know it, 30 or 40 or 50 more emails have come in, and now I'm answering those emails. And and 2 days later, I don't remember that email anymore. And it's not that I didn't mean to, that I didn't want to. It's that there's so many coming in, and there are some people, look, some people just say stuff. Some people just like, yo, bro, I watch your stuff and it means so much to me. I wanted to just let you know. And, and it's like super cool. And I can send a quick email, or sometimes they don't even, they're like, I don't even expect you to respond. I just wanted to let you know that, you talked to this guy and it totally reminded me of my story, and it was a great story. I want to let you know, keep going. Great. Doesn't really require, but some people say really heartfelt stuff. And I think, man, I'd really like to respond to that guy, even if it's just, hey, I got your message. I read it and I appreciate you sending that. And I don't. And, I feel like a dick because of that. And it's not that I'm like, oh, I don't have time for you, bro. It's because there's so much stuff coming in, and it's just me. Yeah. So, if I've missed anybody out there, it's like, I'm not trying to be a dick. Yeah, it's just, I just happen to be one. It just happens to be happening. It's not my fault.
I think if people can't recognize that, like you being you, singly a person can't address every comment and still be able to provide everything that you've been providing content wise and have a normal life. Like if people can't recognize that, that's a them problem. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think I was impressed and surprised that you saw it and addressed it. So I think you're light years ahead of most content creators in that regard. So like I said, I really appreciate it.
Well, that's cool. Wow, that's something. That's something.
Definitely.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate it. Hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do me a favor and hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notified of videos just like this. Leave me a comment. I will try and respond. Also, please consider buying my book, or one of the true crime books I've written, and think about, consider joining my Patreon. It really does help me, and I do appreciate you guys watching. Thank you very much. See ya.